Thank you. So I'd like to start with a small disclaimer, and that is that I'm by no means an Elm expert. So has anybody tried Elm here before? A couple of people, okay. So in the likely event that you probably know more than me, just stick your hands up and correct me, and I'll do my best. Okay. So my name is Patrick Corrigan, and this is my introduction to Elm. It's adapted from a workshop I gave at the Functional Cats meetup about 2 months ago. So today we'll be covering what is Elm, what are its benefits, and we'll go through some examples. So what is Elm? Elm's a functional programming language, and it competes with projects like React and Angular and Ember as a tool for creating web applications. It compiles down to JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. It's statically typed with type inference. All of its functions are pure, and all the values are immutable. So what benefits does this give us? No runtime exceptions. If your program compiles, you're pretty much good to go, apart from logic errors. There's very friendly error messages. So the compiler will almost tell you, oh, you're missing a semicolon, or you're missing a comma here, or it'll even tell you you might have mistyped this variable name. So it's very, very helpful. There's semantic versioning for all community libraries. So if an update to a library changes the name of a function or adds a new function, you'll be warned of that before you perform your update. Has anybody here used Haskell before? A few people. Julian is the resident Haskell expert, I think. It has a Haskell-like syntax. And whether you like that, whether or not you like that is up to you, but I think it's nice and succinct. It's fast, so it uses the virtual DOM, which gives us very, very fast HTML rendering and re-rendering, just like React. And of course, there aren't Elm libraries for everything yet. So it provides a feature called ports, which allows you to use JavaScript libraries from within Elm. So what are we going to do today? We're going to learn about the Elm architecture. So every single Elm application you'll create will have the same architecture. We'll do some examples with user inputs. And if we get time, we'll interact with the outside world, so doing HTTP requests. So first things first, if you'd like to follow along, you'll need to install Elm, and you can clone the repository of code examples. Now, I don't think you probably won't have time today since this is just a quick talk, but if you've done it at home, feel free to follow along. So the Elm architecture. Every Elm program has the same architecture. It consists of a model, which you use to represent the data that you're presenting to the user. There's a view, which takes your model and produces HTML from that. That view then can create events or messages, and that message along with the view, or along with the model, will be passed to the update function. A new model will be created, and that'll be passed to your view function to be rendered. So I think better than me talking about it is to show you an example. So here's how you build a simple counter in Elm. So as I said, every single Elm program has the same architecture. It has a model, it has a view, and it has an update function, which we'll define down here. So I better show you what we're creating first. So what we're creating is a simple counter example, like you might have in a nightclub, for counting how many people are coming in. Okay? So how do we do that? So first we define our model. And we create our model as we essentially here we're saying it's an integer. We're creating a type alias for integer. And this is probably the simplest model we can create. We then initialize our model. We say we assign it, or we don't assign it because there is no assignments, but we say it's equal to 0. That's what our model will be initialized as. Next, we define the type of messages that we'll be able to send along with models to our update function. In this case, we have two message type. We have one message type, and it has two options. It can either be an increment or a decrement. So if any of you are familiar with TypeScript or Haskell, these are disjoint union types. So, and if you're not familiar with any of those functional languages, if you're familiar more with a language that has features like enumerator types, it's kind of like an enumerator type, except there's no possibility of a nil or a null value. It has to be one or the other, and can't be nothing. So our update function, this is how we define function types in Elm. And we say it takes in a message, it takes in a model, and it returns a new model. And in the case that the message is increment, we increment our model. In the case that the message is decrement, we decrement our model. Finally, we have our view function. And our view function takes in a model, and it outputs HTML. Really, it outputs HTML that is capable of producing messages. And we produce HTML in Elm. It's not like in some other frameworks where you'll use some sort of a templating engine, where you might actually insert JavaScript expressions to be evaluated inside your HTML, or you might have to use some sort of watered down version of your programming language. No, in this we use the functions themselves to generate our HTML, and this allows us to. This gives us great power because we can abstract and we can parameterize any of these. Okay, so we can create a button. All these HTML elements take two parameters. They take two lists. The first is a list of attributes, and the second is a list of descendants. So take for this div example, if I wanted a class, I might say class hello inside in here. We don't need anything like that. And its descendants are a button, a paragraph, and another button. The important part here is this on-click attribute that we add to our button, and it sends an increment message, and it has the text plus. Similarly, we have a decrement message that is sent when the decrement button is pressed, and we set its text to minus. And in between these, we just output our model. Okay, our model is just an integer, and we must call toString on that, because this text function is expecting a string. So what actually happens when we're running it? When I click the plus button here, an increment message is generated. The increment message, along with our current model, which would have been 3, is passed to our update function. Our message is of type increment. We increment our model, which is now 4, and that's passed to our view function, which renders the HTML again. And we get a 4. Okay? So now it's your turn. Your turn. Your terrible boss has asked you to add a reset button. He says it's going to make the company millions. So you must now modify your code in examples counter to do this. So it's very nice. So we'll start off. And does anybody have any idea what the first thing we should do is? Message type. Good. What should we do to message type? Bar. Yeah, good. 0. 0 or reset. Yeah, reset's even better. Good. Okay. And what I'd like to show you this now is how good Elm's error messages are. If we refresh this, and I don't know if you can see this here on the camera, but I'll read it out for you. It says, this case does not have branches for all possibilities. You need to account for the following values. Main.reset. Okay, how clever is that? So we can then proceed to add our what to do when we have a reset message. Okay? Does anybody have any idea what we should put in here? Julian, don't answer.
0.
Sorry? 0? Very good. Yeah, some people will say something like this if you come from a more imperative background. Some people will say model is equal to 0. But no, it'll just be 0. Okay? Good. And if we reset that, so we have no compilation errors, so we're good. And now we just need to augment our view. So I'll add another button here. And I'll change on-click decrement to reset. And I'll change the text to reset. We can refresh it, and we now have a reset button. Okay? So, that's a simple counter noun. Does anybody have any questions about the code?
You said it sends a message, but is this the client sending server message, or not? This is just internal?
It's just internal. It's just internal. Yeah, some people don't like that's just the convention to call it message. When I show some people this talk, you are right, message maybe isn't the best word, but it seems to be the convention in the Elm community at the moment. Any other questions?
If you have a larger application, can you have different types of messages?
Sorry?
If you have like 40 type of 40 different values, are there in one type of messages, or can you have more than one
Type of message?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have many types of messages. As far as I know, though, you can only have one update function. Okay? You can only have one update function. Okay. So, a simple text input example, a text reverser. So it's a simple input field, and when we type some text, underneath is output, it's reverse. Okay, and it's nice and smooth and responsive. So how do we do that? So here's the code. As before, every single Elm program has a model, a view, and an update. Our model in this case is slightly different to before. It's using what's known as the record. It's a record type. So if you want a reference for this, it's like an object in JavaScript. So it has an attribute content, and it's the type of that attribute is of type string. The reason I'm using a record in this example is because it allows us to add more attributes to our model very easily later. I initialize our model as the empty string. I have an update function. I have a message that has, it can be of type change followed by a string. And when this change is followed by a string, we'll update the content attribute of our model to be new content. And finally, we have our view. And the interesting part about this is we have a handler on input. And when something is input into this text box, so for example, if I press H here, a change message will be sent along with the H. Even though we don't put the H here, it's implicit in the onInput function call. The H will be passed. We'll go up to our update function. This change case will be called, and our content will be updated to H. Okay. Finally, that model will be passed back to our view, and it'll be rendered with the reverse of model.content, which in this case will be H. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Straightforward enough? Okay. So, you've been asked to convert it into a palindrome checker. So how do we go about doing this? Does anybody have any ideas? Sorry? Split it in two? Okay, no. You don't need to do that. Okay, so I'll start anyway. It's a good start. Let's define how we check if something is a palindrome. Okay, so what type will this is palindrome function be of? Bool. So what will it take in? It'll take in a string, and it'll return a bool. Very good. Okay. palindrome. S is equal to string dot reverse S to S. Okay, does anybody have any arguments about that?
Capitalization of palindromes.
Oh, good, excellent. No, I wasn't. Okay, so we'll see, does that compile? And we've no problems, so we know so far we're good. So what I'd like to say next is we're going to add a new attribute to our model, and we can call this as palindrome 2. And it's going to be of type maybe bool. Okay, so I don't know if you're familiar with Haskell. There's a maybe attribute in there, and if you're familiar with Scala, it's very similar to optional. I don't know, is there something in TypeScript that's similar? But essentially, this is saying that is palindrome might contain a Boolean, or it might contain nothing. Okay. And then down here, oh yeah, sorry. In here, we must augment our model to say initially it will be nothing. And we get new content, it will be is palindrome. And we must say just, because it wouldn't just be a Boolean. It's a maybe Boolean, so it's either nothing or just a value. So in this case, it's just, and whatever is palindrome new content returns. And finally, we can do some pattern matching here. If you're not familiar with functional programming, pattern matching is kind of, you say, if my value is of one thing, do this, or if it's another thing, do something else. So it's kind of like an if statement. And we can do that here. And we can just say case model dot palindrome is palindrome. And if it's nothing, sorry, of nothing, that will go to the original HTML. And if it's just a bool, that can go to the same thing. Since these are just functions, we could write a function that would replace the duplication here. And we can get rid of this. So toString. And then bool. Okay, so I don't know if we got lucky. I'm expecting lots of compilation errors, but we'll see. So I'm probably missing something here. Oh yes. So I'm missing his palindrome here. Line 49. Too many brackets. Okay, so now if we type in H is a palindrome, he isn't, L, E, H, it is. Okay, and that's how you'd create a simple palindrome checker in Elm. Does anybody have any questions about the code or the concept of maybe and just and nothing? Yeah?
When you're outputting the HTML at the end,
Yes.
you know, do you have to like give it like case has to be like one block of HTML, so you like repeat the input twice?
Yes.
Is there any way you can just like
Yeah, you could extract.
you just do lines instead of having to do like whole blocks?
So I guess the best solution to that would probably be create a function that outputs the different parts. But yes, I know what you're saying. You could have an if statement here instead of doing pattern matching. You could say, well, actually you can't. You can't do if statements on checking if it's a nothing or a just bool. Not easily anyway. It'll get messy. Pattern matching along with functions to output the similar parts is probably the best way to go about it. But again, I'm by no means an Elm expert. So if anyone knows any better.
Senior update.
Yeah.
Is palindrome both the Boolean and the method?
Yes, so that's probably my fault. I picked the same name for both. So here is palindrome is the attribute of the record, and when I'm saying is palindrome followed by new content here, this is calling the function is palindrome with the argument new content.
But if there's no issues with scope, then
No.
like you can have method names and variable names.
Yeah, it just knows, I guess. It just knows here. Well, you couldn't have a variable out here saying is palindrome. I think it's because it's part of the record that it understands that it's different.
Would you be able to call that function in your view?
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. You can use that function anywhere. Good. Any other questions? Okay. So, a simple friend list example. So let's say you want a list of your friends. I hope I updated this. Okay, so if you have a list of your friends, I have two friends, Katie and Julian. And how would we model that now? So we can take a look. So here's how we could model this. Okay. We can have our model, and our model. Oh, this is the solution. So we want to go back. Okay. Oh, I better go forward a little bit. There we go. So we have our model is going to be a list of people, a list of person. What is a person? A person is a record with an attribute name and a disposition of type disposition. And a disposition can either be easygoing, angry, or bitter. Luckily, the last time I met Julian, he was in good form, so he gets easygoing. And we have Katie as easygoing too. Okay, you can't see that. In this case, our update function does nothing at the moment. But what is interesting is our view function. Here I've defined a function called toLi, and toLi takes in a person, and it outputs a list item with the person's name. Okay, so this is nice. This is a function that takes in a person type and outputs a corresponding list item. And then we can just we can have a UL function, and its descendants is take our list of people and map this toLi function onto that. So you get nice, concise HTML. So we have a feature request, and that is when clicking on a person, it should reveal their disposition. And I'm going to live code it. I don't know why I do this to myself, but it must be good for me. So our model, when we click on someone, we want it to reveal their disposition. So I'll show you an example of that. Super friend list. So when I click on Julian, Julian's easygoing. I can click back and go back. When I click on Katie, Katie's easygoing. And when I click back, we can go back. So we can create these single-page applications very easily in Elm. So how do we go about this? So it's the same, uses the same maybe concept as the last time. And we'll have a new attribute in our model called selected person. And that will be of type maybe person. what'll I initialize maybe person as when I'm initializing my, or what'll I initialize selected person as when I'm initializing my model? Nothing, good. Nothing, very good. Nothing. Okay, and I'm going to create a message, and our message is going to be called select person. And it's going to take in a person. And what it's going to do is it's going to take my model and update the selected person to be, oh, I must update this, to be person. Well, actually, we'll just call it P. And change will now be selected person. P. Okay. And finally, down here, I'd like to add an on-click attribute to my li, and we'll have it produce a select person message, and it'll take in the person. Okay. And finally, we'll change our HTML. We'll need to do some pattern matching, and we'll say case model dot selected person of, and if it's nothing, we want to display the original page. And if it's just a person, we can display something new. So we might display the person's name, model, no, just person dot name, and text person dot disposition. And we'll need to do a, since this isn't a string, we'll need to call toString on it. And you have to be very careful with your parentheses. If you don't have parentheses here, function, the precedence of function calls is higher than anything else. So if we didn't have these parentheses here, we'd be calling text on two arguments, the first argument of which would be toString, and the second argument of which would be person disposition. So that's why we need to wrap it in parentheses so that toString is called on person disposition first. Okay, and now we'll probably get lots of error messages. Okay, so we have one here. I'm looking for white space, so line 40. No. Does that fix it? Yeah, okay. And then I ran into some expected when parsing your code on the UL, line 44. Oh, from 42 onwards. Oh, very good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, good. So cannot find pattern selected person on line 31. Oh, it's just select person. And cannot find variable on click, so I need to import on click. Okay, and so function P is expecting 2 arguments, so it was given 5 on line 50. Okay, that's just, we need a comma there. Okay, so these are the ones that I worry about. Oh, yes. So I'm probably missing just person. Here we go. So when we update our model, selected person is not equal to P, it's equal to just P. Okay, and if we click on Julian, we see that Julian is easygoing. And to get our back button is very simple. We'll just create a button here. Text, back. On click, and we'll generate a message home. If I compile it now, we'll get an error saying we don't have, well, first we haven't defined our message type home. So that I'm just going here. Then we'll get an error saying we don't have, we have one for button down here, but we'll get that. I'll click home, need a comma. No, we don't need a comma, sorry. Oh, good. Yeah, well spotted. Good, and now we have case does not have all branches for all possibilities. So that's as simple as adding a new case in here, home. And what will we update selected person to here? Nothing, very good. And now we can go back and forward. Okay, so that's it. Does anybody have any questions about the code?
If you're building a single page application, like normally I would think of kind of routing and
Yeah.
URLs as kind of an important concept.
Yeah, excellent, correct. So yeah, there's loads and loads of routing libraries for Elm, and I said I just do without it to get the core concept. So yeah, I think there's two main routing libraries that people do use. So yeah, if you were building a real application, definitely.
How readable is the generated code?
Sorry?
Like how readable is the
Oh,
generated
very
code?
unreadable. Very unreadable. Would you like to see it? Yeah, I can show it to you quickly. I hope I can anyway. Why is this so small? It's probably open on some window. Oh, it's over here to keep my window small. Okay. So. So for that friend list example, so it's elm make friend list.elm, and we can take a look at index.html here, and you can see it. It's just lots and lots of JavaScript.
I guess the fact
That's
there's
the
no,
Adam language,
there's no
isn't it?
runtime exceptions means it doesn't matter so much.
That's true. Yeah, you shouldn't be inspecting your unless you're actually writing the Elm compiler. You probably shouldn't need to look at it because there are no runtime exceptions. Yeah, that's an excellent point, Dave. That's an excellent point.
I noticed you were
Sorry?
minimalist
Sorry?
style, so no CSS. How well does it play with CSS?
It's not too bad. So I've built one Elm app. So I built this friend tracker in Elm. So this is probably the thing I built in Elm. That's the biggest thing, and it's simple. It's just you can click on a friend. Is Julian here? He's not. Okay, so we'll give him a break. We'll pick Emily. So after being with Emily today, I felt terrible. She is so mean. And then I can say I felt much worse after being with her. And it just it records it records all my encounters with all my friends. So you'll have to be nice to me. And to add the CSS to that was very easy. All I had to do was add in my classes to in my HTML attributes. And there's lots of ways to add CSS. There's libraries, there's the whole lot. But what I did was I just generated my HTML and I just put an inline, add my CSS like you normally would into the head. Sorry? There's a Bootstrap library for Elm as well that'll allow you to put it in directly. So this is Materialize. Okay. Any other questions?
So why Elm over
Why Elm? I think the main selling, well, there's a few selling points. Number one is that it's statically typed. That eliminates entire classes of errors. And two, no runtime exceptions. So you don't get any exceptions at runtime. I think that speaks for itself. And 3, you get to write in a purely functional manner, which can help you write more easily debuggable code. Since all your functions are pure, all of the results depend on their inputs, so that makes testing easier.
The debugger comment looks pretty awesome too. Like
Sorry?
the debugger then is comment looks pretty
Oh yeah, I owe the way you can step back into the time-traveling debugger, yeah, and you can do that because your functions are pure.
What about the page that had like lots of widgets on and stuff? Like, you know, how would you break that up? And like, have you tried like kind of a bit there? Like, how does that look like?
How does it look? You can well, I haven't gone much bigger than this. This is the biggest thing I've made, but I separated that just into separate files. I had my update function.
Like taking a single update function and just splitting that into the different widgets, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. I know you can generate pieces of Elm and just embed them in your normal application. So if you had a React application, you can just embed your Elm application for a single part of it. So you don't need to adopt Elm for everything. You could just have it for a small little component.
Are there any testing libraries for it?
That I'm ashamed to say I don't know.
There's Elm test and like you can do property-based testing.
Wow. So you can do property-based testing. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
What's the most similar language to Elm?
To Elm, Haskell. In terms of language, probably Haskell. But in terms of way of building web apps, I think Dave Jeffries told me it is React with, if you use React with something.
Redux?
React with Redux, apparently that gives you a similar style.
Okay.
This sort of style of having a model and passing that to a function, which makes changes to it and then passes that to a view.
How is it to connect it to an external API? For example, if you wanted to persist your list of friends to a server.
It's very, very simple. If you clone my repository, there's an example of building a Pokedex or getting a list of Pokemon from the Pokemon API. And it is simple. The only thing is, the reason I didn't do it today is, you know the way I said all Elm applications consist of a model, a view, and an update? You have these other things called subscriptions and that allow you to do these things. So it slightly changes the fundamental architecture. But it's not too bad, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that it? Thank you very much.